I'm Naomi Carter, 32 years old, and today was the day they laughed in my face like I was nothing. I stood in the grand dining hall of my grandmother's estate, a 3-story Georgian-style mansion that had once felt like the only safe place in the world. But now it was a battlefield. Around the enormous mahogany table sat uncles, aunts, and cousins, all cloaked in designer brands, fake politeness, and real judgment. I was the last to arrive on purpose. I'd pulled up in my decade-old Toyota Corolla, parked between a Range Rover and a Maserati, and stepped out in a navy blazer from Banana Republic. Not that anyone cared about practicality in this family. I knew what they saw when I walked in, the poor cousin who never quite made it. Brad, my cousin, who thought nepotism was the same as talent, smirked as I entered. "Naomi," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You made it. Was traffic bad on the bus line today?" Laughter erupted from the right side of the table. I smiled, tight and polite. "Still driving that Maserati, huh? Hope you figured out how to change a tire this time." A few eyebrows rose. One or two even chuckled. But most of them didn't appreciate the pushback. That was the thing about the Carter family, they expected you to stay in your place. And mine, apparently, was beneath them. We were here for the annual family financial review, a tradition started by my late grandmother to keep the legacy alive. But ever since Uncle Ronald took over, it had turned into a flex-off. Who made the biggest deal? Who bought a house in Aspen? Who joined the most exclusive golf club? It was never about values anymore. Just valuation. Uncle Ronald sat at the head of the table, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Before we begin," he said, swirling a glass of whiskey older than some of my cousin's children, "let's take a moment to acknowledge how far we've all come. Some more than others, of course." His eyes landed on me and stayed there. That's when I knew today wouldn't just be awkward. It would be war. He pulled up a slide on the screen behind him, a bar graph showing each family member's net worth. My bar? Practically invisible. A thin sliver, stuck on the far end of the chart like an afterthought. "Well," he said, "some of us clearly need to consider new strategies." I kept my expression calm, but inside, my pulse thundered. They didn't know. They had no idea. Because everything I'd built quietly, carefully, under the radar. And today, I'd come prepared. But not yet. I wanted them to show their true colors first. I wanted to hear every fake laugh, insult, every backhanded compliment, every line meant to humiliate. Because when the truth came out, when I finally unzipped the leather portfolio tucked beside my chair, it wouldn't just be a reveal. It would be a reckoning. "I'm surprised you even showed up this year," Aunt Celeste said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "You always seem so uncomfortable in gatherings like these." "I'm comfortable enough," I said. "I just don't enjoy watching people compete over who's got the shiniest distraction." Brad laughed. "Come on, Naomi. Lighten up. Some of us just enjoy success. And some of us mistake attention for achievement," I said, not raising my voice. The room fell quiet. For a moment. Then the conversations shifted back to vacation homes and country clubs and investment portfolios padded by inherited advantage. I sat silently, hands folded in my lap, listening. And remembering. Remembering the years of being laughed at. Of being treated like a charity case. Of being spoken about like a side note in a story that was never meant to be mine. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had taken every ounce of pain, every backhanded comment, and every rejection, and turned it into a silent empire. One they were about to discover they were standing on. So I sat there, letting the humiliation play out, watching it all unfold like a show I'd already seen 100 times before. Only this time, I wasn't the same character. This time, I was the one holding the final act. They think I'm still that orphaned niece with nothing. But tomorrow, they'll find out. I own more than they ever imagined, including the roof over their heads. So stay with me. Because if you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or pushed to the side by your own family, you're going to want to see what happens next. I wasn't always the outcast. Growing up, I used to think being part of the Carter family was something special. We had history, long roots in Boston real estate, wealth that stretched back generations, and dinner parties where people whispered the family name like it meant royalty. At least that's how they saw it. I just saw noise. My father, Michael Carter, the youngest son, had been the only one with any real sense. He'd fallen in love with my mom, a kindergarten teacher from a working-class family. She wasn't glamorous, didn't come from money, and never pretended to care about the Carter name. The family hated her for it. When I was 7, I overheard my aunt whisper to Grandma at a garden party, "Michael could have done better. That woman teaches ABCs, for heaven's sake." Grandma just smiled and said, "Better to marry someone with character than someone with handbags." But even Grandma couldn't stop what came next. When I was 15, my parents died in a car accident coming home from a weekend trip. It happened on a rainy Sunday evening. One second, I was waiting for them with dinner ready. The next, I was sitting in a hospital hallway, staring blankly at an officer saying words I didn't hear. I moved into Grandma's mansion after that. She took me in while the rest of the family made it clear I was now the orphan, the project, the girl without prospects. I would catch the whispers behind closed doors. "She's so quiet. Do you think she's depressed? Probably better not to involve her in anything too important. Poor thing, won't have much of a future without Michael." They didn't say it to my face. That would have taken too much effort. Instead, they just excluded me from family business meetings, summer vacations, even birthday celebrations for cousins. Sometimes, I got invitations after the fact, as if it had just slipped their mind. It was subtle, but it was consistent. Every cousin had a path laid out for them. Ivy League schools, internships at Uncle Ronald's firm, first apartments paid for in full, and shiny new cars on their 16th birthdays. Me? I drove my dad's beat-up Corolla and worked weekends at a local bookstore to save money for college. I applied for scholarships on my own, without help. I bought my textbooks secondhand. I stayed quiet when they mocked me for majoring in finance at a state school. Why not something exciting like international relations? Victoria had asked once. I almost answered, because I want to understand how to make money quietly, not just spend it loudly. But I bit my tongue, like always. The only person who truly saw me was Grandma. Late at night, she'd sit in her study, flipping through her old financial journals or stock reports. I would sneak in with a blanket, sit cross-legged on the floor beside her chair, and listen to her explain things I didn't fully understand yet. "Eliza," she would say, "real wealth isn't about what you wear or drive. It's about security. Power, if used wisely. Opportunity. Quiet power is the only kind that lasts." She taught me how to read property maps, analyze value trends, and most importantly, how to wait. The world rewards flash in the short term, but patience always wins long term. I took that to heart. When she died my senior year of college, I didn't cry at the funeral. I couldn't. I just stared at the casket and felt like the last bridge between me and the family, the real family, not the political alliance of egos, had been burned. She left all the grandkids an equal inheritance. My cousins used theirs to travel, buy luxury lofts, or lease cars they couldn't pronounce. I moved into a 400 square foot studio and started investing. And from that moment forward, I disappeared from their radar, which suited me just fine. Until last year when I heard from a friend of Grandma's that the apartment complex where Victoria, Blake, and Brad all lived was quietly up for sale. The owner wanted out. Quiet deal. No press. I called my lawyer, Mr. Whitmore. "Can we do this anonymously?" I asked. He smiled on the phone. "Absolutely. You ready to play their game?" "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm ready to end it." When you've been dismissed long enough, something changes inside you. It's not anger. Not at first. It's silence. A cold, focused kind of silence. I moved into my tiny studio the week after college graduation. The walls were so thin I could hear the upstairs neighbor's faucet drip. My kitchen was a hot plate on a folding table. The only furniture I had was a mattress on the floor and a desk I picked up at a churchyard sale for $15. And yet I felt free. No more forced family brunches. No more condescending questions. No more pretending. Just me, my laptop, and a spreadsheet that would become my roadmap. My grandmother's words echoed in the back of my mind every time I opened a new tab to analyze housing trends. Look where no one else is looking. Invest in what people overlook. So that's what I did. I worked as a junior financial analyst by day, the kind of job my cousins would scoff at. It wasn't flashy. My starting salary barely covered rent. But every extra dollar I earned went straight into savings. No new clothes, no eating out, no vacations, just cold, intentional discipline. I started small, a duplex in a transitioning neighborhood on the edge of Somerville. Most realtors wouldn't even show it. It smelled like mold and had cracked windows. But the numbers? The math made sense. I lived in one half and rented out the other. It covered half my mortgage. I did repairs myself. YouTube was my university, and Home Depot my second home. I painted walls until midnight. Scrubbed floors until my knuckles bled. Took power naps in the back seat of my Toyota between client calls. On weekends, I volunteered at a housing nonprofit just to learn the legal side of landlord management. I was 25, sleep-deprived, and perpetually sore, but I was building something real. I called it the quiet plan. By 27, I'd sold that first duplex at nearly double the purchase price. I rolled every cent into 2 more properties, then 3, then 5. Each acquisition was through a different LLC, created by Mr. Whitmore, the one person who knew everything. "You sure you want to stay invisible?" he asked me once. "Yes," I replied. "I want them to keep thinking I'm poor." He nodded. "Then they'll never see you coming." There were nights I thought I couldn't keep going. Nights I cried alone on my mattress, overwhelmed by debt, repairs, and doubt. One winter, the heating failed in one of my buildings and I drove 3 hours to deliver space heaters in a snowstorm because I couldn't afford emergency HVAC service. No one saw that. No one saw the burns on my fingers from faulty wiring, or the exhaustion in my bones from juggling day jobs and night renovations. But what they also didn't see was my growing portfolio. By 28, I owned 7 units. By 29, I was in double digits. At 30, I bought my first commercial property, a small retail strip in an emerging neighborhood. A year later, I acquired the apartment complex where half my family lived. Quietly, strategically, without fanfare. Each signature on the deeds felt like a silent declaration. You laughed at me. You underestimated me. You never asked what I was really doing. And that was fine. Let them think I was struggling. Let them think I was still that girl with the threadbare coat and discount shoes. Because while they were posing for Instagram at rooftop parties, I was building an empire they'd eventually need to ask permission to live in. And all of it, every brick, every beam, every foundation was built on the values they abandoned: patience, privacy, and purpose. I didn't want to be rich so I could flash labels. I wanted to be rich so I could never be controlled again. So no one could ever look at me and say, "She doesn't belong." I wasn't just investing in property. I was investing in power. And the ultimate proof? It came wrapped in irony. The same building they bragged about living in was mine. Victoria had once told the table, "Oh, you know Naomi's still renting that shoebox apartment. Such a shame. With the Carter name, you'd think she could do better." I remember smiling in that moment, sipping my water, and thinking, "Your rent helps pay my taxes, cousin." But I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. No, this wasn't about ego. This was about timing. And timing was everything. Because just as they were planning to vote on demolishing Grandma's house, the only thing in that family that had ever felt like home, I received an update from Mr. Whitmore. "Another 3% voting share acquired through proxy," he texted. "You're up to 35% now. Enough to block anything major." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I whispered, "Okay, Grandma, I think it's time." Tomorrow, I would walk into that room they'd tried to shrink me in for years. And I would take up space. Tuesday morning. Clear skies. Cool air. And the day the Carter family would choke on their own certainty. I arrived 10 minutes early to the conference room at Grandma's mansion, the same room where I had once curled up in a window seat, reading books while my cousins debated ski vacations. Only this time, I wasn't a spectator. I was a storm coming. I wore a charcoal gray suit, simple, structured, and sharp. My hair tied back. My shoes unbranded but polished. And around my neck, Grandma's single pearl, the one piece of jewelry she had left me, the one that said everything without shouting. As I laid my leather portfolio down at my designated seat, still at the far end of the table, I noticed the others drifting in. Brad, loud as ever, chatting about his new investment opportunity. Victoria, flicking invisible lint from her $2,000 blazer. Uncle Ronald reviewing documents with his assistant, Jenkins, close behind him. No one acknowledged me. They didn't need to. In their eyes, I wasn't even a vote. Just background noise with a last name. All right, Ronald began, standing at the head of the table with the arrogance of a man who believed the universe owed him applause. Today, we finalized 2 items. First, the sale of the mansion. Westbrook Development has offered $48 million. Second, we'll address the issue with that apartment building some of you currently reside in, which we've traced to an anonymous holding group. He smirked. Some offshore entity, shielded through layers of LLCs. Clever, but not impenetrable. Jenkins is drafting a pressure letter as we speak. Pressure letter? The rage pulsed under my skin. They were talking about harassing a property owner, me, like it was nothing. Like it was routine. But I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly and said, "Before we vote, I'd like to present something." Ronald raised an eyebrow. "Naomi, we're on a tight timeline. This won't take long." I walked toward the projector. Not asking. Just doing. Several heads turned. Some confused. Some amused. Brad whispered to Victoria. "What's she gonna show? Her budgeting spreadsheet?" Laughter. Again. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. A net worth statement. My name. My holdings. My 15 properties. My 3 commercial buildings. My total asset value, $73.4 million. Silence. Brad choked on his coffee. Victoria froze, mid-eye roll. Uncle Ronald stared, blinking twice as if the projector had glitched. "I think there's been a miscalculation," he said, voice tight. "There hasn't," I replied. "I've spent the last 10 years building a real estate portfolio using everything Grandma taught me. While you were buying yachts and condos, I was buying neighborhoods." I clicked again. Slide 2. A legal deed. To the apartment complex where Victoria, Brad, and Blake currently lived. Regarding the anonymous building, I continued, walking toward Victoria. "You've been complaining about renovations, guest registration policies, rent increases, all decisions I made." I dropped the physical deed in front of her. "I'm your landlord." Victoria recoiled as if the paper had burned her. Brad muttered something under his breath. Blake's jaw visibly clenched. I turned to face Ronald. "And as for the vote on selling Grandma's home, I now hold 35% of the voting shares in Carter Holdings, enough to block any major decision." His face turned a color I'd never seen before, somewhere between crimson and defeat. "That's not possible," he said. "Those shares are distributed across proxy trusts," I interrupted. "Acquired over time. Quietly, just like you taught me, except I learned from someone better." I reached into my folder and pulled out one final document. The mansion is no longer available for sale. As of this morning, it's been transferred to Elizabeth Carter Legacy Foundation. Fully funded. Irrevocable. And out of your reach. You could hear a pin drop. Then Jessica, the only cousin who'd ever treated me with decency, leaned back and whispered, "Damn." A few seconds later, slow applause. From her, just her. But that was enough. I'd never needed their claps. I just needed the silence. the kind that falls when everything they thought they knew about you collapses. Ronald straightened his blazer. So what now, Naomi? You throw your weight around and punish us? I shook my head. I protect what actually matters. I turned to the room. For years, you've mistaken humility for weakness. You thought because I didn't show off, I had nothing. But I had something you gave up a long time ago: principles. Grandma's vision. Patience. And now, I added, I have something else: the power to enforce it. I walked back to my seat. But I knew the room had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. And they were finally seeing the real me, not the poor girl in the corner, but the woman who could rewrite the rules. The hours that followed were quiet. Too quiet, considering the bombshell I had just dropped. No one touched the catered lunch. The espresso machine, normally chattering in the background, sat untouched. Even Brad, never one to stay silent, just stared at his folded hands, his expensive watch no longer flashing quite so confidently. For the first time in Carter family history, no one had anything to say. Until Ronald cleared his throat. Well, he began, his voice a little less sure than usual. Perhaps this is a good time to reassess how we've been operating. Obviously, Naomi has brought a new perspective to the table. A new perspective. That's what he called it. I just raised an eyebrow. Aunt Celeste followed up moments later, sliding into diplomacy like it was second skin. Family is family, she said sweetly. No matter what little misunderstandings happen along the way, we always come back together, don't we? I almost laughed. Misunderstandings? You call 2 decades of dismissal a misunderstanding? I glanced across the table. Jessica gave me a subtle nod, sensing the moment was mine to shape. Everyone was waiting to see how I'd react. Would I gloat? Would I lash out? Would I punish them like they feared? But no. I didn't need revenge. I already had something better: power with purpose. So I stood again. Calm, clear, unshaken. I'm not here to tear this family apart, I said evenly. But I won't pretend nothing happened. For years, you treated me like I didn't matter, like I was some charity case barely hanging on. You made jokes, whispered judgments, and never once stopped to ask what I was actually building. I don't want your apologies, I continued. I want your awareness. Going forward, if this family wants to function as a unit, we're going to do it differently. The room shifted. Jessica smiled. She knew what was coming. Number 1. I said, the mansion is off limits. It is now the permanent headquarters of the Elizabeth Carter Legacy Foundation, focused on financial literacy and affordable housing. If you'd like to host family events here, you're welcome, but only if you respect the space and what it stands for. Brad raised a hand, hesitant for once. So, are we tenants now? Or guests? I looked him in the eye. You're guests in a house preserved by the person you used to call the broke cousin. He lowered his hand. Number 2, I continued. I will not be participating in any Carter Holdings activities that prioritize ego over ethics. Any future development projects must meet community standards, align with responsible practices, and be evaluated not just for profit but for purpose. Uncle Ronald exhaled slowly, as if recalculating in real time. You're really serious about this, aren't you? I nodded. Dead serious. Then I paused. But I'm also open to building something new, something better. Not for me. For the next generation. For any future child in this family who might not come from money, or might think differently, or might be underestimated. I refuse to let them grow up thinking they have to scream to be seen. Silence. Again. Then something remarkable happened. Victoria, yes, that Victoria looked up and said quietly, I didn't know you were carrying all that. The way we treated you, it wasn't right. It wasn't a full apology. But it was a start. Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. A few days later, Ronald asked me to lunch for the first time in my life. Not out of obligation, but respect. He didn't say the word sorry, but he asked questions. Real ones. About my portfolio, about the foundation, about Grandma's philosophies. And I answered. Honestly. Firmly. I didn't forget what he had done, but I gave him a chance to evolve. Aunt Celeste sent me a handwritten note 2 weeks after the meeting. "You were right. We were blind. Thank you for waking us up." Brad? He didn't say much, just stopped with the smirks. For now, that was enough. And as for me, I went back to my quiet apartment. Still modest. Still simple. Still the same Toyota in the driveway. Because none of this, not the power, not the millions, had ever been about proving anything. It was about remembering who I am. And who I refuse to become. Today, the Elizabeth Carter Legacy Foundation runs mentorship programs for young women from overlooked communities. We teach financial planning, investment strategy, and emotional resilience. We host workshops in the same mansion that once held hushed insults and laughter behind my back. Now, that house holds vision, growth, dignity. Last week, I stood in Grandma's rose garden, the one she loved, the one I preserved. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. "You didn't just protect what I left you, you expanded it." And I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had finally been seen on my own terms. So, what about you? Have you ever been dismissed, underestimated, or mocked for the quiet road you chose only to rise in ways they never saw coming? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if mine gave you hope, clarity, or just a sense of justice served, hit that like button and subscribe. Because there's power in staying quiet until it's time to rise. Thank you for being here.